Project 44 is the official sponsor of the Innovation Theater at Edge 23. We thank Project 44 for their continued support of CSCMP.
We're ready to get started. Welcome and thanks for joining us. Today we're going to talk about the human in the warehouse working alongside a robot in a somewhat roundabout way, but that's what we intend to cover. My name is Kesten and I'm with Generix Group in sales, and I am based in Beaufort, South Carolina.
All right, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
All right, my name is Hudson. I'm with Open Sky Group. Open Sky is a consulting firm that specializes in implementing warehouse and transportation technology, and I'm here with Lori today to present.
Okay. So today, what we really want to cover off is sort of the differences in automation options. It's obviously a very exciting time in our industry and so many new choices coming at us. But we also want to talk about what does orchestration, when it comes to automation, mean versus integration, because there are some differences. But I also wanted to bring to this, how does the human, the people that are working in the warehouses, how does this change, and how can we best understand what they need so that they can stay engaged and remain good employees of yours? So we're going to weave those three together. Jeremy?
All right, so to set the stage here, right, to just kind of repeat some of what Lori said there, right? What we really want to talk about today is the harmonization of automation and your warehouse management system and how those two work in harmony and work together. And it's really important to understand, right? I'm going to quote Gartner on the next couple slides. You might recognize those guys. I didn't make this up myself, right? They're expecting, we're on a brand new wave of next generation warehouse management technology, right? And so you can go talk to all of these providers. There's some really fascinating things happening in the warehouse management space. And based on Gartner's prediction, right, the amount of technology innovation we will see in the next few years will be greater than the technology innovation we saw in the warehouse management space in the last 25 years. And so the way I want you to frame that in is think about how a warehouse worker interacted with a WMS 25 years ago. They came in. By that time, RF was already in place. They grabbed an RF gun. They started scanning. They interacted. It gave them instructions. They did what the instructions said. Guess what? It still works that way, right? So where we're expecting a lot of innovation is true changes to how that WMS interaction works. Now, in terms of automation, and the reason we're seeing so much of that, if you would have asked me that 5-10 years ago, I would have told you, oh, well, it's labor cost. It's reducing the amount we're spending on human bodies to do activities. But who attended the keynote closing sessions yesterday? Anybody attend those, right? I think we all learned there's a labor shortage here, right? And so that is the primary reason that Gartner is seeing folks implement automation in their warehouses today, is based on that major labor shortage that we're seeing throughout warehousing. So a little bit more on where we expect to see automation. And some of this, listen, folks, you may already know some of this, but just bear with me, right? The major processes in a warehouse: receiving, put away, replenishment, packing, shipping, right? All of this, every warehouse does this. I'm not telling you anything terribly new. We're all kind of familiar with these activities, okay? But look at our productivity usage and labor costs by area. So some of you may already know this by being in the warehouse as well. 60% of our labor spend is in the outbound processing, the picking and the packing. So if you're wondering, where do I get the most impact from automation, and where can my WMS help the most in efficiency? It's going to be in that pick, pack, and ship area. So we'll talk a little bit more about forms of automation later, and it's going to center a lot around that pick, pack, and ship area, simply because we know that's where you can improve and get the most efficiency from those innovations.
Okay, so on the next segment, what we want to do is help you understand how should you invest in automation to go with your warehouse management system and so on. And I think it's important for you to start to think about the categories. We used to say crawl, run, and walk. That's how you deploy a WMS. But we've decided that you're never going to crawl if you're implementing automation, okay? So you're going to learn to walk, run, and run faster. That's where we're at now with the newer technologies. And so we're going to kind of cover off what technologies are available, but we're not here to sell certain types of technologies. That's sort of beside the point. What we want to make sure we're doing is, number one, making sure we're keeping people engaged, because if you are to attract good workers in your warehouse operations, you need to be able to engage them. They need to be able to see and understand what's going on. In the past, when we deployed automation, we used to call it a black box or a black hole. I've been in 100 warehouses that have automation where the workers are really just feeding the beast, right? They don't know why they're doing this, but they've got to, this thing's got to be fed and they've got to do it. I think those days are over, because the next generation of warehouse workers, they want to engage. They tend to be gamers, people that want to get to the next level and use technology to get to the next level. So you can't build black boxes and holes for them to have to live with. So we'll talk a bit about that.
Yeah, the other point I wanted to make on that last slide is you'll notice there's a progression here, right? In the way we're recommending to innovate in the warehouse. I was at a warehouse actually just a couple weeks ago in Missouri, and they went immediately to run faster. Okay, so day one they said we're going to build a groundbreaking high-tech warehouse, and they have a graveyard in their warehouse of technology that didn't work the way they expected it to. When they saw the simulations or whatever pitches they got from their engineering teams, it looked beautiful on paper, but by virtue of implementing that, they had AMRs that didn't work effectively. They had bag sealing processes that would cut product in half occasionally if it wasn't read correctly. There was just all of this odds and ends automation that was piled up in the corner of the warehouse that literally wasn't being touched. It was up for sale at that point. They basically were doing a rummage sale from their automation venture, right? And so, what we want to make sure of is, from a WMS perspective, how this links back to this is, if you're going to take that progressive iteration of technology innovation in your warehouse and automation innovation, you need a WMS that's adaptable to that versus doing 3 separate implementations as you progress through different stages of automation. So what I wouldn't want to see is, okay, we did the crawl walk method, right? We did that very first phase. That's one WMS implementation. Oh, now we're ready to go up to run. Call those WMS guys back. We're going to have to do a re-implementation, rethink everything again. Oh, we're going to go faster. Let's get the WMS guys back. That's not how we want that to work, right? We need a WMS that can scale with the automation improvements that you're making versus investing millions of dollars in tons of automation day one that's not a cohesive fit. And so that's really the approach we'd like to emphasize here.
Very good.
And so talking about some of that automation, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, right? Again, a lot of folks are familiar with this. If you're not, there's booths all over the place that can talk about specific forms of automation. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time. But what we mean on that first phase, that walk phase, right, is simple shuttles, ASRS, conveyor. This is your traditional travel reduction technology. So all it's really doing, it's not replacing people, it's bringing product to and from people, it's reducing the amount they travel, thus making them more productive, thus you need less people because they're not doing that wasted transit time. So that's our walk, right? And then we step it up to run. So by the time we get up to run, right, we're into sequencing and sorting, and sorting is really the emphatic piece here. So when we get into sortation, that's really taking some of those user activities out. So your pack stations activities, et cetera. If you're doing batch picking, it's reducing a lot of that manual, this goes that direction, this goes that direction, this goes in that box, this goes in other box, right? The sortation is going to step it up a level. And this, again, think back to that slide that showed where most of our labor was spent, right? It's right here in this pack out, sortation, those types of efforts. So that's what we're talking about there. And then run faster, right? This is where we all dream to be. This is where we're all going to be someday. This is where Bezos is getting us today, right? So robotic arms, potentially drones, a lot more goods to person, robots, AMRs, that type of thing, right? So this is true getting into people replacement automation. So not only are we reducing travel or reducing people effort, in this method, we're really reducing people entirely, right? We're taking the jobs that people needed arms to do and replacing those with robotic arms.
Okay, so with that, we're going to move into a little bit about, okay, so you've got all this automation. what do you need to prepare not only your physical operation, but infrastructure-wise, everyone knows you're going to need some sort of integration, right? Something that speaks to all languages of automation. And guess what? Good news is they do, because they know they need to. So, you know, this part is not as hard as it used to be. But when we look at the warehouse management system, I keep going back to the human component, and it's like, what can we do to make sure that the operations, that the guys, the super users, the supervisors, the managers can see what is going on? So this is a screen capture of an actual demo. This is our system, SoloChain, the warehouse management system. And this is actually in the system. And it's what we call the warehouse mapper, right? And so the warehouse mapper is a part of the WMS and can be used anywhere. As long as the data is in the system, it can be presented in a visual way. So imagine as an operator, and this is a real-time view into your warehouse, into your operation. So you will be able to look down into the operation and see where's a pinch point, where's a hot spot for us today, right now, right? Because people, especially millennials, they don't want to consume a bunch of data, information. They don't want to read a bunch of stuff. They're very visual, and I don't blame them, right? Why can't we present stuff, information, and we can, in a way that's easily consumable so that I can understand what's going on? So the possibilities are really almost endless as we introduce technology. Represent it on the mapper. Understand what's going in or out, what's there. Click on a button and see what's happening, okay?
Yeah. And on this one, right, something to keep in mind is that when I showed you all those robots earlier, all the cool pictures and all that stuff, you know what those guys don't focus on? Software, right? They are much more concerned about hardware. And so when I'm developing AMRs and all these ASRSs and things like that, you go to their UIs, not the prettiest thing you've ever seen. You go to their trace and trackability capabilities, not the prettiest thing, not the most innovation there. They're focused on the actual physical hardware aspect of what they're building, and good for them. They're great at it. We love them. Yeah. Great stuff. Focus on that. When you're thinking through warehouse management software, though, you do need to consider, how are you seeing that, right? How can a WMS assist filling that void, that chasm of that software loss that you get when you implement those robotic solutions and automated solutions? There's so many of those where, yeah, you've got that robot buzzing around the warehouse, but do we know exactly how efficient those robots can be? I mean, I know major 3PLs that are putting labor management standards against their robots now, right? They want to know that they're utilizing those correctly. And so having visibility tools like this that are real-time, live insights to not just your people, but also your automation and robotics, whether it's number of hits, slotting, right, congestion, all of those key elements, seeing that in your WMS software fills a huge void, right? And that's where we're seeing that innovation Gartner was referencing. It's filling that void between the automated world and that WMS world that's existed for 25, 35 years. We have to find new innovative ways to not just look at people, but also look at all of those other facets that are now part of our warehouse. And the other piece I'll mention here is, if you ever want to frustrate a warehouse supervisor or manager, by the way, no one's replacing those people, right? They're still going to be in the warehouse of the future. If you ever want to frustrate them, tell them, don't worry, the robot will do it. No, just look at, it's fine. The screen says the robot's doing it, right? That's so frustrating. Having a WMS that gives you those insights, that tells you, okay, this is the task that's assigned to that AMR. This is the task that's in the ASRS's queue. Getting that visibility, that control, that sense of how the overall operation is working cohesively, you get 10 times more employee engagement that way, just by them understanding this is what the systems are doing, this is the interoperability that's happening. All of that visibility in a system like this is extremely insightful for those users.
Okay, good. So next, what I'm going to talk about is, again, with the WMS, you're going to be, as you're deploying new technologies, you're going to be making changes to your system regularly. The days of deploying a WMS and then saying, don't touch it because we got it right finally, are well over. And so this is actually also a part of our WMS. And what this is, it's better in a demo, but what this is a process workflow. So this is how we can set up processes in the system so that it actually moves along and you actually see the screens, the mobile device screens, as you're setting this up. And so you can test and eventually train with this part of our system. So this output is right out of the WMS. Nobody created this. Nobody took a drag and drop of screenshots. This system, but they did some of the graphics on the bottom. But the system will follow a process and show someone exactly what screens they're going to see and what they need to input. So on a daily basis, if you needed to, you could go in, run a process, hit the button, print it, PDF, take it out to the floor, hand it to the operators. Because you're going to also have high turnover in these operations. And so you're going to be constantly training. So that the old days of creating training manuals and trying to figure out how to put together training that's outdated, 2 weeks later, it's over. So you need that to be inside the WMS. So because the WMS becomes, you know, the operations team's way to interact with the entire operation.
But Lori, do me a favor, go back a slide. Now, I know everybody left their propeller hats at home, but there has to be a few people out there. How many people have done the if clause writing in sequels? The if-thens, right? How many people have done that? How many people have read a trace file and tried to figure out which if clause it followed and everything? This is so cool. Where was this 10 years ago when I was having to delve through those trace files and figure out when a user got a prompt versus when they didn't get a prompt versus when I would tell them to capture a lot number versus when I wouldn't, right? This versatility in a system, when we say, listen, fun game, next expo you go to, next trade show, if you guys are here tomorrow, go to all the WMS booths and see how many times you can spot the word or hear the word adaptability.
Yeah.
Right? That is the key term in WMSs these days. This is what we're talking about when we say adaptability. It's truly, I'm implementing a new form of robotics. I need to be able to add these captures from a user. I had a site one time that was implementing a new ASRS. Well, now I've got to put product into an ASRS. That put away looks a lot different than a conventional put away. That decanting process, that unpacking, putting into a tote, etc. Having the ability to build out screen flows that support those types of operations, I mean, that could cost thousands for some WMSs to customize. And so, I mean, having the ability to build that out in these screen flow type operations, that is the automation or the advancement we're looking for in this industry. And if you go to this next slide, I can't emphasize this enough. Training, 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 right? So we talked about productivity, closing session yesterday. I'm going to go back to that again, right? We talked about the best way to get more out of your operation, the best way to get more out of your people in a lot of ways, the best way to get more productivity may not be a robot. It might be training those folks correctly that are using the system. Right? Making them more efficient and productive in how they use the system. Having the ability to generate these training aids real time. Here's every screen that you interact with and what you're expected to enter. I mean, you change a process, you print that out, you hand it out in pre-shift. Everybody's on the same page. They instantly have it. There was no consulting involved. There was no Visio, right? It is print the sheet, hand it out, everybody's on the same page, including the system, because that's who originated this. Right. So really, really cool stuff. The other thing I'll emphasize here is if they're not productive in these new screens that you're implementing and you have automation, you've just thrown off everything. Nothing will aggravate an engineer more than a productive robot working with an unproductive person, right? Throw off every model you've ever had. Key thing here, your WMS has to support efficient robotics. Otherwise, you'll spend twice as much as you need to on robots, and those babies aren't cheap, right? And so it is key that you've got a really intelligent WMS that's orchestrating work as it's sent to those robots.
And by the way, with SolarChain, our users, our customers can make these process changes themselves. So you do not need to get back in touch with Generix Group to do some of this work. We have users that can deploy a new site on their own by being able to use these tools. So we thought this needs to be easier. It needs to be easier for us, but it needs to be easier so our customers can do this themselves if they want. And so that's why we developed these more visual tools and why we went to this type of configuration. Okay? So that's it. That's what we had for today. I hope you learned something new, and thanks for attending.
All right, thank you.